Mr. Murphy, you graduated from the University of Illinois in 1974, and you had a degree in journalism, and now you're sitting in PR. What ultimately led you to end up being in corporate and then agency PR?
Well, I started out in newspaper business in Buffalo, New York, and enjoyed it a lot, but discovered you couldn't make any money at it. And I had an opportunity to be a speechwriter for a CEO of a big company, and I took it. And from there, it launched my career into public relations and eventually into broader business assignments. I ran a division of a large company for a long time, in addition to my public relations background, and I have broadened my experience into a marketing role. So in my most recent role at Accenture, I was Chief Marketing and Communications Officer. So I have a pretty broad business background.
Okay.
I wish 1974, by the way, was the right year. It was 1958.
Where did I get 74? Okay, 1958. Yeah, okay, 1958. Okay. Well, during those years at Owens Corning
Right.
and Beatrice and Merrill Lynch, did you have a mentor as you worked your way from strictly journalism expertise into speech writing, into doing more of a role within public relations?
I can't say I really did. I mean, there were a number of people very influential, but there wasn't really one mentor. I mean, Owens Corning, I had opportunities to work with the CEO, so that gave me lots of exposure in the company. And as I eventually ended up, I was a division general manager. I moved out of public relations, went into line management. And that was helped through that CEO's involvement. But I never thought of him as a mentor. It was just where I ended up. And then I was recruited to both Beatrice and Merrill Lynch, and there were people there who were recruiting me. But I never felt they were there, trying to look out for my well-being. I mean, not that they were in any way negative. It was just the mentor I think about is Professor Sutton at the University of Illinois, who helped me get their first job. Okay. And I was a guy working his way through the University of Illinois from Belleville, Illinois, and didn't have a lot of money, and I had some ambition. And there were a lot more qualified people, I thought, in my class that he could have recommended for this job in Buffalo, but he recommended me for some reason. And it was interesting because it was a summer intern job with no guarantee you would get the job in September. And I will never forget, I went to Buffalo, I was earning $52.50 a week, lived in the YMCA, and bet my life on 3 months of work. And there was a guy from Harvard and a guy from Yale all competing for this job. Maybe they wanted more money or something, but I got the job, so it was great. So that's how I got started in journalism anyway. So.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I would be jumping here to 1986 when you went to Burson Marsalis.
Right.
But is there anything, can you talk about, that at Owens Corning, this is where you worked closely with the CEO, then you were recruited by Beatrice, and also from there recruited by
Merrill Lynch, right.
Can you talk a little bit about your experiences at Merrill Lynch?
Well, Merrill Lynch was and is one of the most dynamic companies in the world. And in the financial services business, there's never literally a dull moment. So it's a high wire act at a financial services company like Merrill Lynch, and there's never any let up. The tension is constant. Crisis du jour, whether it's a bond crisis or a credit crisis or some broker's done the wrong thing or whatever, it's just a hugely tension-filled, anxiety-filled role. A lot of people, I loved it, it was great. But with some management changes there and some other things developing in my own life, I wanted to try the agency side, so that's where I went to Burson. So.
Okay. So you landed at Burson Marsalis in '86, and can you just talk a little bit about those challenges that you found when you made that transition?
Sure. Well, I moved over to run the corporate practice at Burson, which was a natural fit for what I'd been doing, and I had experience in 3 different industries: diversified food business, manufacturing, Owens Corning, and then financial services with Merrill Lynch. So I had a good background to do this. And the first couple of years was spent building the corporate practice. And I think by the time we finished that exercise, we were it was the largest corporate public relations practice in the world. And then I moved into running the New York office, and then the U.S., and then the Americas for Burson. And that's what I was doing until Accenture, at that time Andersen Consulting, convinced me to do something differently. So,
Let me ask you a question now with all this experience. What do you think about accreditation for PR professionals? Do you see this as something that is necessary for the field, similar to medical accreditation?
Well, I think it's a lofty ambition. A lot of people think that we need it. I don't know how practical it is. There's no certification to be a CEO because there's broad responsibility. So the public relations professional is the only person in the organization who has a similar set of roles as the CEO, touching on everything in the company. And so how do you train for that? I mean, how do you certify for that? Well, you have some basic things, but most of all, you have to know about the business you're in. So how do you certify someone to know about Merrill Lynch or about Owens? I mean, it's just hard. If you're looking for background requirements today, if you don't have an MBA in business, no matter what field you're in, you're probably missing a bet. And liberal arts background, professional experience in communications, an MBA is probably the best bet going forward. I had a journalism degree, and that was great. But I would guess you could make a case for a liberal arts background, too, against that. But I'm on the development board at the University of Illinois, so I don't want to say this too loudly. They won't like that. But Illinois does a great job. I've been on the advisory board at Medill at Northwestern, so I'm deeply involved in journalistic education. But I am saying that you can come from another space, too, to be successful in the field. But knowledge of business and the company you're in is absolutely essential, because without that as a given, you can't even sit at the table. So you have to be credible about the business.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any experiences going into the classroom situation and talking to students about?
I've had some. I've been back to Illinois a couple times. Haven't done a lot of that. No, maybe I'll do more of it now, but I haven't really done a lot of that. So.
Do you think that today's students graduating in public relations are ready for ethical decision making as they, first start out and work their way through the business world?
I think so. I just haven't had enough exposure to that. Although we recruit at Accenture, we recruit a lot of people, so I get exposure to graduates that way, and I find that today's graduate quite ethical. See, the ethical business to me is, well, of course. I mean, you don't go to business today in a large company without being ethical. It's a given. I mean, it's a price of entry. It's not a plus. I mean, if you're not ethical, you're not going to survive today in a transparent world. So I think the kids, the young people coming into business get it. I think they understand that. So.
Okay, good.
They certainly see enough headlines about people who are not ethical, so yes. They ought to get that message, right?
Right.
The media do not let up on this. So.
No, you're correct. Let's talk just a minute about ethical leadership and get into Accenture and everything that happened there. So it's a very complicated chain of events for me as an outsider, just reading what I was able to read about what happened. It started in '89, which was the year of the establishment of Andersen Consulting within Arthur Andersen firm.
No, that's an erroneous statement. Okay, we'll start with that, because that's a core issue right there, what you just said. In 1989, an organization was formed called Andersen Worldwide.
Okay.
And under Andersen Worldwide was put Arthur Andersen Accounting and Andersen Consulting. They were two separate business entities entirely. Andersen Consulting, per se, was never part of Arthur Andersen. It was a sister company. Now, it came out of Arthur Andersen as it was known as the Administrative Services Division of Arthur Andersen. But when they formed Andersen Worldwide, two separate companies were formed, and the ownership of those two companies were divided between the partners between each. And that was a confusing point throughout the entire set of exercises. And the arbitrator, at the end of the day, clarified that very, very sharply, that their ownership was split in '89. There was never any connection after that time. So It's an interesting long story. I was fortunate to be there in the sense that it was a phenomenal public relations and marketing challenge. But it came out of the marketplace driving people's actions in a way that it was unfortunate, because what happened was the consulting business was much more robust and profitable than the accounting business at the time. And the agreement had to do between the two companies with sharing earnings each year. And Andersen Consulting was paying Arthur Andersen $100 million a year because of its greater success. Well, Arthur Andersen, in violation, as the arbitrator found later on, of the contract between the companies, was reinvesting that money going back in the consulting business. And the basic agreement in '89 was consulting business was for Andersen Consulting, and auditing and tax was for Arthur Andersen, and there was no to be violation of that. And there was years of arguments about that, of debate, and are you violating the contract or whatever. And finally, in desperation, the management of Andersen Consulting filed an arbitration against Arthur Andersen and Andersen Worldwide. That was the only vehicle they had. They couldn't. The bylaws wouldn't allow litigation, only arbitration. And the arbitrator, 2.5 years later, ruled totally in favor of Andersen Consulting, said that both Andersen Worldwide and Arthur Andersen had violated the contract, and he dissolved the contract. And so there's no longer any connection between the two. Now, interesting enough, in the contract was the licensing agreement for the use of the word Andersen. That was owned by the Illinois Partnership of Arthur Andersen historically. And the contract, which was voided at Andersen Consulting's plea, essentially eliminated Andersen Consulting's ability to use the word. So we had 144 days to find a new name for Andersen Consulting. And working in 100 countries and trying to find a new name, working global, is almost impossible. We had 5,000 candidate names, and 10 cleared all trademark clearances, et cetera, out of 5,000. Just 10. We could have used only 10. And we picked Accenture. It was an idea of one of our own consultants, and actually it's English is the second language for the person. It's a Scandinavian who said, accent on the future, put them together. It was that simple. So that's where it comes from.
Wow. Well, could you maybe add to the problems you had with all the rebranding and the launching,
right.
the launching of the...
Well, it was an unbelievable task, and it's a case study among case studies. I mean, there's nothing really ever like it in business to business in particular, because you couldn't use the word after January 1, '01. You just couldn't use it. It isn't like you could drag it out or put up with some guy in Germany saying, well, I'm not going to change until March, or I don't like the new name and I'm not going to do it. None of that was permitted. And that, in one sense, was a plus, because no one was able to drag their feet. So we marshaled ourselves in a way that was remarkable in retrospect. In one sense, the marketing and communications function, which I led, ran the company for a couple months, because everything had to be turned to make this change. And we were very successful at it, and it took us 75 days to get the name, then 75 days to implement it. But think about it. We had 85,000 people, just the business cards for everybody, okay? Every sign, every database, we had 15,000 databases that had to be changed. Every paycheck, you can't, hundreds of thousands of changes. And what we did was we put together the project was led by co-leaders. One of the people in marketing worked for me, and the other person came out of our project management teams who work for clients who do big technology jobs. And so this is an individual who understood how to take every piece of a project and track it. So we had the partnership of the creative people and the marketing types with this project management skill set, which worked very well. So it was phenomenal success. And the company just relishes it. I mean, it's a phenomenal thing we did.
Oh, it was a daunting task.
Right. And within 12 months, the Accenture name was the 51st best brand by Business Week. Yeah, best known brand in a year, right? That's right. Right.
I remember the ads.
Yeah. One of the things we did, a couple other sidelights, we didn't want to promote the Andersen Consulting name, but we wanted our advertising to continue. So we used a device where we crossed out the Andersen Consulting name in logotype and put in 01/01/01, which was coincidentally the date of this change. Right. And 01 in computer talk is a crucial set of digits.
Exactly.
So that's our business. So it just, serendipitously was beautifully done. It worked out great. Another thing that happened is we couldn't bring ourselves to throw away or burn all the paraphernalia we use for golf events and giveaways to clients and employees, T-shirts and everything. So we gave them to charitable organizations. And I got a call one day from an attorney at Arthur Andersen, very upset at me because he had seen a street person wearing one of the Andersen Consulting T-shirts walking down Chicago because the YMCA or someone gave these things away, and he thought we were degrading the Andersen name because they wanted to use it, see, going forward. So that was, we just couldn't bring ourselves to burn them. I mean, so, right. So they're still floating around somewhere, thousands of them.
Let's talk just a second about just outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
Were there functions that you outsourced at Accenture, and do you outsource some work now in the firm you're
Well,
currently in?
a part of the arrangement I had with Accenture was I provided my management services through my own company. I was not an employee of Accenture, but I served as head of marketing. So one outsourcing was to me. I mean, the leadership was outsourced. In addition, there were other opportunities for Murphy & Company to do other work for Accenture. That was part of the contract arrangements. And we do much of the internet work for Accenture, the website and a lot of internet marketing. In terms of outsourcing the marketing communications functions, we use major global advertising and public relations firms around the world, and we also have used a corporate identity firm. Other than that, there's 500 people at Accenture in marketing and communications, so it's a combination of outsourcing but it wasn't really, we didn't consider it outsourcing. I mean, we considered it specialist skills that we weren't going to staff inside. It's a more traditional view of using agencies as opposed to outsourcing. Although the relationship with Murphy was more an outsourcing situation. So now, in terms of outsourcing, Accenture's in that business of outsourcing to major clients, from major clients, in every business process you can think of. And I would guess there's probably 65,000 employees of Accenture who do outsourcing work for other companies. But not in communications, not in marketing. So.
All right, let's just take a look at mission statements and create it.
Right.
Go back to Owens Corning and Beatrice and Merrill Lynch.
Mm-hmm.
Did they have codes of ethics? And also when you were there, and also now with Murphy & Company. Did you have formalized staff training to promote ethical behavior?
I'm trying to recall. I know all of them had mission statements and ethical standards, no question about that. Certainly Accenture has extensive training in ethical behavior, and Merrill Lynch does too, I'm sure, because they have all the compliance issues they have because they're a regulated company by the federal government. So there's all sorts of training around that at Merrill Lynch. I think, I can't remember, frankly, at Beatrice and Owens Corning if there was formal training, but there was certainly formal communications about it all the time. And you signed a document every year about your pledge to be, the code of ethics. But I can't remember, frankly, whether it was training or not. So.
Okay. What about Murphy & Company?
Well, we're small. We're 75 people, and we have a code of ethics, but we don't have any formal training classes in a sense because we communicate regularly about it, and a training class didn't seem to be necessary. So, but if we got larger, we would have to do that, I'm sure. So, all right.
Well, I mean, you've sort of answered this, but you feel it's pretty important for a corporation, whatever size it is, to have a ethics or mission statement?
I mean, I don't think it's like having a profit and loss statement. There's not an option to it. I mean, it's sort of, when you talk to someone in the public relations business and they don't say to you, well, that's a given, then they don't get it. I mean, you have to have a set of ethics today. It has to be enforced, but I mean, it's not like something it's an idea someone does. I mean, you just do it. I mean, it's not a program like someone has an idea to do it. I mean, and at the end of the day, how else could you operate? Today's transparency of big companies, there's no choice about it. So it's what you do beyond the standard ethics. It's where you pay back to society. It's how you direct your investments. It's how you treat your people beyond the ethical behavior, beyond the ethics of it all. It's how you think about your clients and your customers. It's how you treat your suppliers. It's well beyond ethical behavior. It's just being a solid citizen and how you operate around the world. Interesting enough, I'm connected with Public Relations Coalition, and we've done something around Brand America, because it's been suffering in recent years. And what American businesses do around the world in terms of community service and if you would, ethical behavior, is so far outshining any other country's businesses. It's unbelievable. I mean, American business operate at such a high ethical level in comparison to most companies in the world. It's remarkable, and I don't think we get a lot of credit for that.
I want to get a few more questions about that
Mm-hmm.
in a couple of minutes, but let me ask
Sure.
you a little bit about terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, public relations, communications, marketing, and advertising are all getting muddled together, and it's especially apparent with advertising and public relations in both the corporate and the agency side. And then there's this whole thing about branding and
Mm-hmm.
branding, and where does that lie? Could you talk about some of the changes that are happening in the terminology within the industry now?
Mm-hmm. Well, the terminology discussion has been going on since forever. Okay, about what's public relations, what's public affairs, what's corporate communications, and where does marketing and advertising start? I think you should have to step back and look at it. This is a business problem or business opportunity for an enterprise, and how they deal with all their constituents. And each company is going to probably be different about this because people are different, markets are different, circumstances are different, investment levels are different. But if you looked at a spectrum of closer to the commercial end of things over to the more societal end of things, you'd see sales way over here, marketing sort of in the middle, you'd see corporate communications here. Then you'd start to see public affairs, government affairs, corporate citizenship over this other end, and social responsibility. That's a CEO's job, okay? Now, how he or she decides how to do all that, it's really individual. Ideally, he'd find someone, not necessarily the sales piece, but the rest of it, he'd find somebody who could do it all and oversee it all. But it's hard to find people with that kind of experience. So to me, it's it's a debate about the people you have and the capabilities they have to handle this spectrum, as opposed to labeling the spectrum or putting one label on one piece and arguing about which is the right piece. I think the debate about the language is academic. I mean, excuse the expression, but it's not it's not that important. It's what's important is understanding the interplay of all these activities with your major constituents and managing them properly. And our speaker at this meeting, CEO from Abbott, really gets it about handling all that. And we were very impressed last night by his remarks regarding that. So the debate over language to me is not a big deal, but I'm sure we'll be hearing about it for years. So.
Right.
So.
But I really wanted to capture your...
Right, but if you think about the spectrum of how you deal with the external constituents, and of course your internal ones too, and think about that's the space you should spend your time worrying about, not about what labels are on which piece.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, okay, so you're looking for that individual who will be able to handle
Mm-hmm.
that whole continuum, what you were just speaking to. Can you sit there and tell me what you think might be the characteristics and qualities of the person
Right.
who could...
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I handled most of that for, not the sales piece, but most everything else at Accenture. And what permitted me to do that was broad background in all sorts of industries, all sorts of activities. fortunate enough to get assignments across all the communications and marketing disciplines, but you sort of need that. But at the end of the day, if you don't understand the industry and the business you're in, you can't even come to the table. And if one piece of advice to young people, you've got to know your business you're in, because you will not be credible beyond writing press releases if you're not. So it's hard. Now, what's the background of people typical? I think you go back to what I said before. Today, you need the MBA, you need the business background, you need communication skills, and then you try to get as broad experience base as you can. And whatever company you're in, you better know it well.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the current state of PR and technology. In the past, traditional media was used to influence public opinion, but now with changes in media structures and what we're thinking may evolve in the future, do you think the use of traditional media is falling out of the PR toolbox and it's being replaced with all kinds of new technologies, blogging, whatever? And how does a PR person who wants to create change actually accomplish it? And how has technology changed that whole process?
Right. I think you have to look at it not from the toolbox, but from the intermediary channels that you need to use to reach your audiences, no matter what business you're in. If those channels change, you better be there. The channels are changing with new media, so you got to be there. And I think the old channels will still be around also, but the emphasis on them will be quite different going forward. And I mean, the newspapers are suffering every day from obvious issues. Any kind of print journalism, unless it's highly focused, is slipping. And everything's going to online, and all the lack of control and all the things we talk about are happening to us. But it's all about making certain you know what channel your audience is going to be most susceptible to use, and that's where you have to be. And you better be there before your opposition or your antagonists are, or you won't win. You won't win the battle of ideas or whatever else you're involved in. So very important you understand that it's a channel thing that you don't control. The channels are going to move on you. You just have to be there as they move with it, as they move. So.
Okay. Now, something in some of the articles and the recent things that I've read about your experiences, you've really gotten into public diplomacy. It seems to be a bit of a passion for you. Now, you wrote, and I don't remember where I read this, that you believed it was a huge mistake when the U.S. government dissolved the USIA, the United States Information Agency, and that happened in '99.
Right. Excuse me.
And then it spread its responsibilities around to other functions. And then it slashed the budgets of those entities. Now, Arthur Page worked with 3 presidents during the times of rapid change in the world, and he advised military leaders on how to communicate with their constituencies. So can you talk a little bit about how Page principles are applicable to the realm of public diplomacy?
Well, just go down the principles. Public relations should be, you should conduct it as if the life of your business was dependent upon it. You should conduct public relations for America like America's life is dependent upon it. You have to deal with the truth, you have to have fun in the way you're doing it. They all apply. With USIA, it was like a large corporation eliminated the PR department and cut the budget. I mean, and who's going to tell your story? Every little division is going to tell, no, it isn't going to work that way. And that's what's happened to the U.S. government. Outside of the big Defense Department, State Department, and the administrative, political, they're all politically governed activities. There's no one agency that's there sitting there telling the American story, the U.S. story like it used to. And USIA and Voice of America and all those tools were very instrumental in ending the Cold War. And we have even a greater challenge today in the war of ideas with the rest of the world, the Islamic world in particular, where there's ideas that are absolutely shooting at us. And we don't have an adequate response or defense that's unified and coherent. And I think that's a big mistake, and I don't understand why our administrations don't get it. It's so simple at one level. I assume it was all eliminated because of some set of politics that wanted to get rid of USIA, and but the State Department and Karen Hughes is well-meaning, and they're doing some, they're doing good, interesting things, but it's still very splintered and not cohesive enough, and not enough of a partnership yet with the private sector. And that's what we were trying to do with the cooperative thing we did with the State Department, is call attention to all the terrific things the private sector is doing around the world, and put a spotlight on it and encourage more of it. And the report we published had 11 steps, practical steps companies could take to either emphasize what they're doing already or to step up and do some new things that can help in this cause of building the reputation, rebuilding the reputation of America around the world.
I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more about that. We've got a crisis of trust, obviously, in the United States. And you've mentioned the PR Coalition working with the State Department and what you're trying to do with American businesses. Can you take just a minute and tell me what the PR Coalition is all about? Okay.
The PR Coalition is a loosely knit group of 20-some organizations such as Arthur Page, the Public Relations Society of America, all public relations, public affairs oriented organizations representing about 50,000 professionals in the U.S. I helped organize it when I was president of Arthur Page, because what we saw was all these various organizations doing similar things with no crossover, no interplay, no cooperative effort. So the first thing was just to get together to see what we were all doing, to see if there's any common ground to work on. And so out of that came a number of initiatives on 2 or 3 of these organizations working together, and that was positive. But we decided we wanted to identify key issues that we could work as a coalition and conduct what we called summit meetings. And we did one on corporate trust, which was 5 years ago, I think it was. Then 4 years ago was one on diversity in the industry, and the last one we did was last year on public diplomacy. And what it does, it serves as a catalyst. The PR Coalition has no staff, no budget. It's sort of myself and a bunch of guys who call men and women who get together now and then, represent these organizations. The theory is we do these summits and the organizations themselves take all of that material and disseminate it. And theoretically, 50,000 professionals in the U.S. have received materials coming out of the PR Coalition efforts through their own organizations. In addition, with the State Department cooperation, they've disseminated our report all over the world, certainly throughout their own diplomatic corps. And last week, the final letter went out, a joint letter from Karen Hughes and myself, to the 1,000 CEOs heading the 1,000 best companies in the U.S., Fortune list. So that was just done, and it's urging companies to take a look at this. It's a small step. I mean, public policy is going to be the big factor in our reputation around the world. But as long as business is doing as well as we do around the world, we ought to take some credit for it, and that's the theory behind it.
Must be exciting work.
It is. It is. It's very hard because you can't see. It's not like changing Accenture name on 0101 and see this huge success. Okay, it's just like a dripping faucet. It takes so long to make progress.
Okay. Well, that said, the second summit that you had was on diversity in the industry.
Right.
Okay, so it's been a few years now.
We're
seeing some...
Well, we're going to launch the second wave of that this fall, and we're going to see what's happened.
What is that second wave?
The second wave, that was a benchmark study. It was the research study we did as part of the summit. Talked to the heads of agencies and the heads of large corporate departments and their attitudes and input about what's happening with diversity in the profession. And it was a benchmark, and it had X issues in it and things coming out of it. Now we're going to do the second wave this fall to see what progress is going to be made. Okay. So we'll see what happens, right?
Great.
That's right.
Because it is a real concern.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the concerns is trying to find enough candidates. I mean, the minority candidate today in public relations or marketing is in high demand. I mean, I know at Accenture, we put on our recruiting numbers were not good in this space, and I go to the recruiting organization, so what's happening? Then we can't find the candidates. We can't find a candidate, and when we do find them, there's 10 other companies bidding for them, and they're bidding their price, the salaries up higher than we want to pay, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, well, you're probably not doing this right. They're going to Northwestern looking for minority candidates like they go to Northwestern the last 25 years. Well, you're not going to find many more minority candidates there. Let's go to places where they are. And so whether it's Asian, whether it's African American, whether it's even American Indian, Native Americans, we're recruiting where they are at Accenture now. And I think we've the last 2 years, I think 30% of our intake were minorities and getting in the marketing function. So. But it takes a special effort. You just can't do what you've done in the past, because it's the old expression, you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results.
So have you been in the classroom?
I haven't, but I've had people who work for me at Accenture with extensive networking in classrooms and at networking events, job fairs and that type of thing. So, no, I'm gratified with the success we did make, but it took special effort.
Right.
So, right.
As it does to make any change.
Right.
Right. Okay, well, we're looking at kind of wrapping things up right now, and I just want to ask you, in your life, looking back on your career, and maybe not even in your career, which of your accomplishments are you most proud of?
Well, it'd be hard not to nod at the Accenture launch, because we created a new company and it's a phenomenal study. But I was involved in, for many years, particularly at Burson and in all the companies, I managed a lot of crises. And whether it was the Perrier recall, if we remember that years ago, or whether it was the Salomon Brothers bond crisis, or whether it was some fire chief burning tub showers for Owens Corning by pouring kerosene on it and lighting the kerosene to show they were flammable. I mean, these are things which are very exciting in the moment, because you've got to act within seconds of things. You get on an airplane, you have no time to think about it, and you have to go on your instincts. And they're some of the most exciting times in any kind of public relation career. But and the life of an organization can rest on your decisions. Now, we happen to work with Warren Buffett, the Salomon Brothers thing, and so we were sort of just executing because he's brilliant. But in a number of the crises we worked in, we were actually making decisions, business decisions. And you can sink or swim with a business by what you do in the public relations field. So that's very exciting. I think the most exciting thing I've ever done, though, is having my son join me in my business. And Murphy & Company is run by my son and myself, and that's been so gratifying I can't describe it. So
It must be wonderful to work with you.
it is, right. I don't know how he puts up with me, but it's great. That's right. That's exactly right. So.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Anything for the upcoming PR professionals to think about?
Well, it's an exciting field, and I know it's attracting a lot of people today. It's becoming a more important seat at the management table in big companies, and everyone's always uneasy about we can't define it like it's an accountant or a lawyer or whatever. And I just say, don't worry about that. This is a business position. You mirror the CEO's role more than anybody else in the company, because after the CEO takes over for a couple of years, he gets all his operations straightened out, or she. It's all external stuff and all the employee stuff he has to deal with, and that's the PR guy who's going to help him with that. So that's the exciting part of the future for this, because more and more companies cannot hide, they cannot get away. It's all transparent, and the professional who's at the side of the CEO is going to be the public relations professional to help him with that.
I just want to thank you very much.
Sure, glad to do it. Good.
For sharing some time with us.
That's great.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, right?
Oh, thank you.
Good. Hope that was all right.